morning. How are you all today? Thank you so much for coming. I recognize many faces, many returning faces, and we're so glad to see you again. And for those of you who are new, my name is Christy Landon. I'm Director of Human Resources for Henry County Schools, and this is our first substitute orientation for the 2017-2018 school year. We really appreciate you being here because you have a huge impact on our students when our other teachers are out, and so we appreciate you coming. We have a lot of information to share with you. For those of you who have been here with us for a number of years, you know that. So we will go ahead and get started, and we appreciate that. Of course, everything that Henry County Schools does begin with our vision and our mission. Our vision is that Henry County Public Schools is where critical thinking is expected, creativity is nurtured, technology and innovation are embraced, and learning is celebrated. And our mission is to always be a high-performing school division, providing all students with an exemplary education in a safe, supportive environment that promotes self-discipline, motivation, and excellence. Our 5-year strategic plan does focus on 5 different strategies. Among those strategies, the one that our department works with most closely is high-quality professionals. And again, you are an important component of ensuring that we do have high-quality professionals who are always maintaining the education and the instructional environment of our students. We have a number of people who are going to be speaking with you today. I'm going to start off with just some general reminders, okay? So if you have not substituted for us before, it's important to know that you do need to make sure that you know the start times of the schools where you're going to be working, where you've agreed to work. The start times for elementary schools are earlier than the start times for our secondary schools, the middle schools and high schools, so you can make sure you know what time you're supposed to be there. Please familiarize yourself with the policies for Henry County Public Schools. Our policies are online, and the easiest way to know what the rules are to be maintained within the schools are to review our Code of Conduct, which is on the Henry County Public Schools website. Please be prepared with how you're going to handle classroom management. So we are so fortunate that we have a number of retired school teachers who serve as substitutes for us. So you've been handling classroom management for many years and you know what your plan is. If you are new to us and you are just embarking on your time as a substitute teacher, please make sure that you have a plan for how you are going to deal with it when there are problems or discipline problems within the classroom, because if you haven't thought it through in advance and then it happens, you don't have a lot of time to react and respond. Please make sure that you do read the substitute guidelines that have been given to you by Ms. Rohr. Always plan to make sure that you dress appropriately, and that includes professional attire, no jeans, also preferably no flip-flops. We would ask that you be prompt and reliable. If you do take an assignment, we are counting on you to be there, and the principal and those in that school are counting on you to be there that day. So we would ask that you be reliable and maintain that assignment and do show up. Report to the office and sign in upon arrival, and make contact with either the principal or the designee within the office about your assignment that day. Check the teacher mailbox, because a lot of times the teacher will leave information and materials for you in the mailbox. Make sure that you obtain a substitute badge when you go to the office, and you do need to wear that badge throughout the day, anytime that you're in the building, and Mr. Scott will touch base on that as well. Please make sure you familiarize yourself with the teacher emergency handbook, drill plans, and exit plans, the teacher's lesson plans. Unfortunately, there's not always a seating chart, but if there is a seating chart, that is very helpful if you're able to review that in advance. Any technology that you may need to use during the day. And you know, Henry County Schools does pride itself in being one of the most progressive divisions within the state with regards to technology. We do have a lot of technology in our classrooms and in our schools. In a given day, you know, your students could be using iPads, you could be using smart boards, you could be using Apple TVs. There are a number of things that you could be working with. If that is of concern to you and there's something that you do not know how to use, never fear, because all you need to do is ask a student and the students will help you with how it works, okay? And they will enjoy knowing something that you don't know and that they can share with you. So make sure that you know where the bus and car rider lists are, because once dismissal time comes, it's a very busy time of the day. There's a lot going on, and if you haven't made sure that you put your hands on those bus and car rider lists, it may be too late by the time the end of the day arrives, okay? At the end of the day, you will always be asked to complete the substitute teacher's report to the principal. And along with that, leave a note for the teacher with regards to anything that you were not able to accomplish that day, or you know, any concerns that you may have had to address while you were there with the students. And report to the office at the end of the day to make sure that you sign out, turn in the substitute teacher's report, and turn in your substitute badge. Okay, so some responsibilities in dealing with the students. Please keep in mind that your role is to supervise students first and foremost, and to make sure that they are safe, always to ensure their safety. We would ask that you demonstrate enthusiasm and positivity with students as you work with them. You have the ability to make or break their day, so keep that in mind. Keep in mind how much you can influence them during the classroom, you know, the class period that you have them, or the day that you have them, whichever the case may be. We would ask that you do expect students to address you professionally by Mr., Mrs., Ms., or Miss. That you be a role model for them and show professionalism and integrity with them in all that you do. And please always maintain their confidentiality. Please be respectful of students. This sounds like something that we wouldn't need to tell you, but please remember, don't touch them, smack, curse, or yell. It's just best if there are no hands laid on them in any way, unless there is a safety issue, okay? Stay focused on the lesson plans, and please stay away from topics like politics or religion. And this is where I always remind everyone, please don't talk to them about Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, or the Tooth Fairy, because even though you may think that they're old enough that they should know about those things at this point in their lives, you know, a couple of years ago we had a major issue when a substitute teacher said something about the fact that Santa Claus wasn't real in front of a 5th grader who did not yet know that his parents were being Santa Claus. So if you can avoid that topic, that would be great. And please just remember that there's a very direct relationship between what you expect of them as the teacher and what their achievement is. So if you have high expectations for them, they are going to perform better for you. Please allow students to go to the restroom. If you have a student that you think is abusing that right and really is asking to go to the restroom more often than they should be, then please address that with an administrator. But we would ask that you not make the decision that they just don't need to go. You know, we also had a situation, we have had situations, and we had one in the last few years where a student asked to go to the restroom, the substitute said no, and the student, who I believe was in the fourth or fifth grade, then, you know, had an accident right there in the middle of the floor in front of all of his classmates, and you can imagine that you would not want to be the child that had to live with that for the rest of his educational career. So we would just ask that you not make the decision about whether or not they truly need to go to the restroom. If they're abusing it or potentially abusing it, then please discuss that with an administrator. Mr. Scott will address this more closely, I think, but all of the classrooms should now have keys. And when you leave the room, we would ask that you lock the doors and keep the classroom locked. Mrs. Adkins also will be talking about the acceptable use policy and use of equipment, but it will be your responsibility to monitor student use of electronic equipment in the classroom. And make sure that you do follow the teacher's lesson plan. Like I said, if there's some reason that you are not able to follow all of the components of the teacher's lesson plan, make sure that you leave a note for the teacher to indicate why that wasn't able to be done. We would ask that you not use your cell phones, check email, or things of that nature during the school day. You know, we are counting on you to be there to be the supervisor and the teacher in that classroom. And so that's going to take your full focus. We would ask that you not read, you know, personal material during the school day, or to use the schools or the students' technology devices for your personal use. We would request that you not eat in front of the children, leave the building for lunch, or leave early. The students are not allowed to eat fast food, so you know, we ask that employees not do that in front of them. Here's a big one, is that we ask that, you know, if you're looking for your next substitute assignment, that be done outside of the instructional day. When you pick up a sub-assignment, it is time and date stamped. So if you are working that day and you pick up that assignment in the middle of the day, Ms. Rohr sees that and she knows that you did it while you were working. So we would ask that you not do that during the day. And never leave students alone in the classroom. The normal work day for teachers as well as for substitute teachers is 7.5 hours per day. The same goes for an early release day. We do have several days throughout the year with a 3-hour early release. Because the compensation for the day is for 7.5 hours, we do expect that you would stay for that 7.5 hours, and so the principal or designee will likely find other responsibilities for you on an early release day if you're working on that day. Also, the principal may ask you to cover other assignments. If you are working particularly at a secondary school and you have a planning block or a planning period, the principal may ask you to cover for another room during that time. If you're working in a classroom that does have paraprofessionals, we would just remind you that you are still the teacher in that classroom, and it is still your responsibility to serve as the teacher, not for the paraprofessional to have to step in and serve as the teacher while you're there. One thing with regards to working as a substitute and doing other part-time employment for Henry County Schools, we are not able to allow you to work multiple part-time positions for us, and that is because of maintaining hours under the Affordable Care Act from a benefit standpoint. So if you're working as a substitute teacher for us, we just need to remind you that we're not going to be able to have you also working as a substitute cafeteria worker and substitute bus driver and a coach and all that sort of thing, or doing homebound instruction. So we would ask that you're going to need to decide which part-time position you would like to do for Henry County Schools. Also, we do have a cap, and we're not able to allow you to work more than 134 days out of a school year. We seldom have people who reach that, but sometimes people do. So, and when you get close to that point, Ms. Rohr will call and let you know. So everybody likes to know when you're going to be paid. You will be paid monthly by direct deposit. Everyone who works for Henry County Schools is paid by direct deposit, whether full-time or part-time. Pay periods begin on the first day of the month and end on the last day of the month, and you are paid on the mid-month. That's usually on the 15th. It's not always on the 15th. So, you know, if you do not receive your direct deposit, you know, on that day, please do not be concerned, and give it a couple of days before you call, because, you know, the payroll department is working on getting that done. Any questions so far? Okay, then I'm going to ask Mrs. Adkins to come up, and she's going to talk to us about acceptable use.
I'm Beth Atkins. I'm the Director of Technology and Innovation, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our acceptable use policy, and that is the policy that governs our technology. So everything that is available to you or the students would fall under this policy. The first thing we want to talk about is social networking. No employee in Henry County is allowed to be on social network during the school day. But we do have some teachers that use Twitter to push out homework assignments, but you probably will not be responsible for that. Also, when you're social networking at home, please make sure that you do not ever take pictures of students and post those pictures, because we don't always have permission of every student to have those pictures posted. And also, when you're posting on social network, remember that you also represent Henry County. And so even if you've had a bad day, because we all have bad days, try to be positive and upbeat, or it's always a good rule of thumb, if you don't have anything nice to say or post, please don't, because it does look bad for us. But if you do have a problem that you think that has made your day bad, that needs to be addressed, make sure that you talk to your principal. Don't leave school feeling like something wasn't addressed or that you had an issue that needed to be addressed. Make sure you take care of that before you leave, because we want all the kids to be taken care of and all the employees to be taken care of, and you guys are part of our team too. We ask that no employees text or use their phone for personal reasons during the school day. We realize that sometimes there might be an emergency situation and that you need to, but a lot of times the teachers or the subs will just kind of mention to the principal, hey, I'm waiting to hear from a doctor, I'm going to have my phone with me. Just want to let you know, but I won't be on it for any other reason. So if you do have a situation like that, just communicate with your principal. Make sure that you, Ms. Landon mentioned earlier, that you're not doing anything personal with the technology. So if you are left with the teacher's laptop and you are using it for assignments for the smart board, that's fine, but be careful not to be checking personal email. We've had personal emails left open on students' devices, and then the student comes in the next day and reads this love letter that so-and-so wrote, and you don't think about it. You think when you shut it down you've logged out, but that's not necessarily the case. So it's just best if you don't do any of those personal things. Don't check your bank account. You wouldn't want that to accidentally be left up. I think that's it. Just one of the rules that we have for our kids is they cannot use each other's device, because if they break another student's device, then who's financially responsible for that? So if you are in a class that has an iPad and someone forgets their iPad, they'll have to have a worksheet that day. They will not be able to have technology. So same for a cord, because if a cord breaks, then who's financially responsible? So just try to remember that. We are asking this year that kids bring their devices every day. That's part of their homework assignment, and that it's charged 80%. So you may be expected to be using technology with your students in the classroom. And also would like to add that we've added iPads to 9th grade. So if you're asked to sub in a 9th grade classroom, know that they may be using an iPad for some of their assignments. But like Ms. Landon said, if you're not sure what to do, they can probably tell you, because they know more about technology than we do, because they've grown up with it. But if you need anything or have any questions, you have ITRTs and technicians in every building, so there should be someone there that day that can help you. So, and if you can't get them, if you'll just email me and we'll figure it out. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Keith Scott. I'm the Facilities Director for Henry County Schools, but I also get a chance to chair our Safe and Orderly Learning Environment Committee. And we get to work on trying to improve the safety and security of our facilities throughout. A lot of you have heard my spiel many times before on it, and some of you may not have, so just be patient with me and we'll try to get through it. And I won't sing into the microphone, even though it's very tempting. All right, we view safety as a responsibility to everyone. So it's not just for our teachers, not just our students, not just the community, but everybody should be working together to look at how do we create a safer, a better learning environment for all of our students. And so we view this as a responsibility of everyone, and you'll see us, we'll have community partners visiting the schools from time to time as we practice our drills. A lot of our emergency responders are part of it as well. So the more they get familiar with the building, the more we get better with our plans, the better we are in the event of an incident takes place. We think about panicking. We've talked a lot about this on it. The students are going to look for you to make those decisions, right? No matter what the situation is, if you panic, you run and scream and holler, that's what they're going to do, right? If you remain calm, they're going to look for you to give them that guidance. And so we practice this as much as we can, all of our drills, so that it becomes second nature to you. And you don't have to worry about, hopefully, into a panic situation, no matter what the incident was to take place on. So just be prepared at all times and thinking of a plan. Now, my kids always make fun of me when I go to a restaurant. I've got to sit with I got to face the door. I love facing the door because I want to see what's coming in and out, and I've always got a plan of escape if I need to for my kids. Now, some of you may say, what kind of life do you live, Keith? That's pretty rough if you've got that. But it's just, I guess, dealing with a lot of the safety and security. It's kind of made me more aware, and I'm always thinking of a plan so that hopefully there's not a situation of a panic if it was to come up. And again, you're going to have to make some of these really tough decisions. One of the things is, it's kind of, I guess, a bummer to think about, but we throw it out there just to make you think about it. If a shooting was to break out in the school and you're locking your door, we've got procedures in place for your lockdown drills, but you lock the doors and then you hear somebody banging on the door trying to get in. Do you open that door for that person? No, you don't. That's a tough call. None of us want to be in that situation, but you may have 25 or 28 other students in that room that you've got to think of, and you've got somebody else knocking on the door. You don't know what's happening outside when that's going on. So always be aware of that on it. You got to make some tough decisions. If you're outside on the playground, you hear shots fired in a building, you're going to run back in the building and hide? No, absolutely not. Run somewhere. Let somebody know. You get those students safe somewhere off site, and then let somebody know that you've got them all accounted for. Some things to look for that's in the classroom when you arrive or anywhere in the building on it. There's some teacher emergency handbooks. These are red in color. They're color-coded charts on there that gives you procedures for tornadoes and earthquakes and lockdowns and what happened. So please review those books, look over them. If you don't see them in your classroom, let that principal know so that we can make sure if we're missing a few, we need to order some more and put them in there. All the rooms should have that readily available for you to review. You should have an attendance roster in there. A lot of these, most all of our classrooms are going to have a to-go bag. So if in the event of an incident breaks out and you got to get those students out, there should be a to-go bag in that room somewhere that has the roster so you can account for your students or any other information that'll help you take care of those students during an event of an incident. There's call buttons in every classroom. You should be able to press that call button and ring the office in the event of an emergency. I would encourage you to test it out when you arrive. Just call them. Just want to check, see how you're doing today. At least you know it's working, right? And I would much rather know it's working than not. And I will say a thank you to each and every one of you. When we practiced our drills this past year, and as you know, we do a lot of our lockdown drills unannounced. They're changing that format a little bit where we'll have to do 2 of them within the first 20 days. It'll be handled in the school, but 2 more throughout the year will be unannounced. So you never know when we're going to show up to do that. But I will tell you, at every debrief that we had last year, we would ask, how many substitutes you have in the building today? 5, 10, 2, whatever. We never had an issue with that. So I want to thank you for the work that you've done. Are we where we need to be? Absolutely not. We always got ways to improve, right? And I think I ask you every year, if you don't hear keys, if you go to a school and you don't have a key in that building, this is my email address. Email me directly. Ask the principal about it. We have gotten some feedback over the past couple of years, and we're trying to improve that. But I will tell you, we still want to work on that. So it's never perfect, right? It's always got to be something that we can improve on. So please let me know. But thank you for the work that you've done in a lot of different situations, handling those drills, if you Ms. Landon, I'm sorry, excuse me. The badges warn everyone. There should be, everybody in that building should have some type of identification. They may wear it on a lanyard, they may have it on their belt loop. Our maintenance guys will have maintenance shirts on with their identification on. Visitors should have a sticker that go on their shirts when they arrive. If you see anyone walk in that building that does not have some type of identification on, I would ask that you to stop them and ask them who they are, where they're headed. It could be construction workers, it could be visitors that just, their badge fell off, whatever the case may be. And if they, you know, I'd much rather you have that conversation, and then if they ignore it and walk on, please report that to the principal so that we can know. We don't want anybody in our buildings that's not supposed to be in there. As Ms. Landon mentioned about the locked doors, all of our classrooms should remain locked at all times. A lot of these, we've put these magnets in place too, so where your classrooms can stay locked, and in the event of a lockdown, you just remove these magnets, and you don't have to worry about fumbling with a key and trying to lock the door back. Again, it's not all perfect yet, but we're making some improvements on that. If you see some or have some suggestions, please let me know. And I would ask too that our exterior doors, check those. You're walking through the hallway, push on them and check. Sometimes they don't latch all the way. Sometimes a class has gone outside and they put a rock in the building, in the door, to kind of keep it from closing all the way. I would encourage you to open that door, kick the rock out of the way, and close the door back behind you, okay? If they get mad, they get mad. They're not supposed to prop those doors open under any circumstances whatsoever. You may have some of our maintenance guys come up and knock on the door and say, can you let me in? No, you can walk around, okay? Or you got a key, whatever the case may be. We don't allow anyone through those exterior doors, and they should remain locked at all times. The only way that people should be visiting or coming in and out is through the front entrance on it, unless they have a key. And I would ask that you report any suspicious activities. Anything that you see that's just kind of, that's kind of out of the ordinary, please report that. It's always good to err on the side of caution. We practice our drills so that it becomes second nature, and I would ask that you would report anything that you're a little uneasy about on. At this time, I want to open the floor, so if you had any concerns or suggestions or things that you saw this past year that we need to continue working on before I turn it over. I'm sorry.
Did you ever get those doors? I think it was only FC that I had the problem with, but you would lock them and then you would click them twice and it would open.
I hope so, but if you're at FC and we didn't, please let me know. Do you remember the room numbers on that?
I know that the one that I was in, you got, but I know that there were a couple of others that were doing something similar.
Yeah, typically, and I appreciate you bringing that up, part of our debriefing that we find is if we've gone through a drill and we've noticed that maybe the doors didn't lock right or we had an issue with it, we try to send our group out there to get that fixed. But if you do find those that are still not.
I know we had a lockdown while the door was like that because I'd already put in the order for him and he filled it, but it was still doing the same thing.
Still doing the same
I
thing.
just shoved the desk in front of the door.
Well, great idea. Yeah, that's exactly right. You find a way to barricade that door. You did right on that. I will check on that. I appreciate that. Anybody else?
Should you have a key as well as a magnet to get in the door? Because I've been to schools where I just got a key, but I did not get a magnet, so when I went outside, I had to wait for somebody to come to the door.
Wait, all right, I make sure I'm following you.
Magnet to,
The,
open the outside door, come back in.
oh, you're talking about the card readers for like this? Yeah, no. You won't necessarily be issued one of those card readers for the type doors in there, but but what we will work on, we can do that. We can have a substitute badge that can be, I guess, kind of given to you when you show up, as long as it's returned back, so that we can control those a little bit. So we don't want to have a bunch of them floating out there and then not get them back, and so that's a good question on it. Most all those, the keys, were just for your classroom doors.
There are enough remote things that you take outside for PE, right, to go around?
The walkie-talkies on them, you're talking about the handheld walkie-talkie?
Right.
There should be.
Right, for those.
Yeah, matter of fact, we've just purchased roughly about 8 more this year because we keep hearing from principals, hey, we'd like to have a couple more for this reason. And a lot of that had to do with people going outside for PE. So there should be available at every school if you're going outside to be able to grab a handheld. All right, anyone else? All right, well, I appreciate your feedback, and I'll turn this back over to Ms. Landon. Thank you, and welcome to Henry County.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Lisa Gardner. I'm one of the school nurses. I work at Magna Vista. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. I see familiar faces in here. What we're going to discuss today is, I don't know if I can work it just as well as everybody else. Yeah. Workplace injuries. Now, if you get hurt in a workplace, you're at a school and something happens and you get injured, please report that immediately to an administrator. And most of the buildings will have a health office assistant or a nurse. Please report this and let someone know. We have proper paperwork that you can fill out, and you have to call the nurse company 1-800 number and give them the information about what happened. This has to be done within 24 hours of the injury at that building, okay? If you do not report it, workers' claim may not cover it, okay? So it is very, very important, regardless if you think it's very minor or more severe, you need to report it. Safety comes first. Don't get up in a chair to do something. You use common sense about proper safety to prevent injuries, okay? That's the primary thing. If we can prevent injuries a whole lot better than dealing with them after the fact. Any questions about that? Every school has these papers that you have to fill out and report if that does occur. And in your packet, you should have received OSHA information, bloodborne pathogens. This talks about body fluids and blood coming in contact with this. We need to review this. Please review this information about the OSHA, and you can sign the form saying that you have reviewed this and you understand. Anytime that someone has blood or body fluids, like a nosebleed, for instance, first of all, if they're old enough, they can pinch their own nose. Tell them to pinch their own nose, okay? Second of all, there should be some gloves available. Most of the time, we'll have little packets in a Ziploc bag in all the classrooms that has a pair of gloves in it. Make sure you put gloves on before you deal with any type of blood or body fluids, okay? A lot of times you can hand them a tissue or a paper towel or something and let them hold pressure until you can get some gloves and put gloves on. Do not touch body fluids with your hands. And if you are exposed to blood or body fluids, make sure you wash your hands immediately and report that, because that also has to be turned into workers' comp, okay? Just as a precaution. Even if you don't need to go to the doctor or whatever and you're up to date on your hepatitis B shots or whatever, it still needs to be reported as a precaution, okay? Your safety comes first in that incident. Anybody have any questions about OSHA and bloodborne pathogens? The other thing I want to cover is, just minorly, is diabetes. Okay. Most of your teachers, if they have a diabetic student in your classroom, they will leave you a note saying this child has diabetes. Anytime you have a diabetic in your classroom that you're subbing in and they need to go to the nurse, please do not send them by themselves. I had an incident last year where a person sent a student from the front of the building, Magna Vista's huge, to the back of the building to my office by themselves, and of course you all do not have access to let me know they're coming to the chat. And when she got to me, luckily she didn't pass out in the hallway, but her blood sugar was 28. Okay, so something seriously could have happened, and I thank the good Lord that nothing did. But keep that in mind. If you have a diabetic in your classroom, please, please. And if you think it's that low, don't send them anywhere. Hit the call button, and somebody can bring her a snack and get that sugar up before she moves. Because she walked a long ways before she got to me. So I did want to hit that because that did happen to me, and I was very upset because I was worried about that student. So any questions that's medically that you have students in your classroom, please don't hesitate to ask, okay? Any questions for me? Thank you so much, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day and a wonderful school year.
Good morning. I'm David Scott, the Director of Student Services, and I'm going to do the next little bit with you here and try to make this as fun sounding as possible, but unfortunately I have to talk about bullying, which is like one of the worst terms I hear throughout the school year because it gets thrown around a lot and misapplied to a lot of situations, and everybody's blood pressure goes up when they hear about a bullying situation. So can you all hear me? Well, I know I'm not speaking down into the microphone, but can you hear me well enough? Okay. Thank you, first of all, for being here and for having an interest in being a substitute teacher. The role that you play when you go into a classroom is one that, having been a former principal at an elementary school, when we know that there's a substitute coming in, we learn very quickly which substitutes give us that level of comfort, which substitutes we're a little bit anxious about. And I want to tell you some of the secrets about being that substitute that gives us confidence, the one that we want to keep in high demand and have back in our classroom. And a lot of that comes from, kind of knowing the culture of the building and knowing I don't want to say in a demeaning way, knowing your role there, but understanding the role that you can play there. Okay, and that's keeping your eyes open and looking at the students as they're moving through the hallway, paying attention to some of the patterns. You're going to be asked to do a ton of things in the classroom, following a lesson plan, making sure that everybody's in the seats the right way, getting from point A to point B on time. But one of the very important functions of your role in the absence of that teacher is to notice some things that might not be right. Okay, the teacher in there every day. Teachers are amazing at picking up on those little subtleties, and they know when a student is not quite acting herself. But a substitute has a great advantage too, and that you have fresh eyes when you go into that classroom. You don't always know these students, and so you have a real good barometer of knowing what normal behavior is and what abnormal behavior is. So when we're talking about bullying, it's best to try to pin it down to a simple definition, and so that we can all work from the same sheet of music, I guess. But when we're talking about bullying, we're talking about this unwanted aggressive behavior. We're talking about something that is a real or perceived imbalance of power. Okay, so big kid, little kid, or rich kid, needy kid, or popular kid, socially awkward kid. There's some imbalance there that they don't seem like a true matchup. And it is repeated over time, okay? Part of the battle that the schools fight all the time is parents pick up the phone and call the school as soon as their daughter comes home and says, she's upset, she's crying about something happened in the cafeteria that day, and it may have been a mean look that was exchanged, it may have been somebody called her an idiot, somebody said her shoes look stupid, and it's just mean-spirited, age-appropriate behavior, okay? And that's one of the things that I want us to understand is that kids, to a certain extent, have to be allowed to be kids, okay? And they are going to make mistakes, they're going to do things in social settings that we wouldn't want our children to do, but it's a learning process, and they're in the right environment for that learning process, okay? And so not every misstep that a child makes, we're gonna turn into a bullying situation, okay? Because God love them, there's a place in this world for kids to be mean to each other and learn from it and get over it, okay? But what we want to make sure that we're doing is we're picking up on some of those incidents that don't scream, hey, this is a bullying situation. And some of that is if you notice that one child in particular seems to be the target of a lot of the interactions that are going on. If you notice that people are, when your back is to them and then you turn around, you have their attention right away, that's not always normal behavior for an adolescent, okay? If if you have their attention while your back's to them, they're doing something when behind your back, okay? So pay attention to those things and understand that, bullying comes in lots of different shapes and sizes, okay? Those 3 bullets there kind of call out what I just mentioned, and we'll get to this in just a second, but I want you to conjure up that image in your mind of that stereotypical bully. And I always picture, that kid who's a little bit bigger than his classmates. He's sort of got a little bit of a jagged haircut and a pack of cigarettes rolled up in his t-shirt. Okay, the only 5th grader with a tattoo. That's not who our bully is anymore. Okay, that stereotype has sort of run its course. We're talking more and more about the kid that you wouldn't expect to be the bully, the kid that hides it well, the Eddie Haskell, if you will, the one that can put on that act and seem like that straight-laced kid. But a lot of times it's our star athletes, it's our valedictorians who have a way of kind of finding a way to needle somebody and make it hurt. Okay, and so it's not to say that you have to suspect everybody, okay, but don't be surprised if those interactions that you're watching, if you're seeing things, even some of that behavior from a good kid. And so what this slide talks about is a change in perspective. Okay, we can't go through and just look through the hallways and say, there's the bully. Okay, I know he's the bully because he's 4 inches taller than his classmates. Okay, but what we have to understand is that this is a behavior. This is something that has been mislearned along the way, and we're trying to get support to that student because, trust me, having been a principal, when I knew that there was a kid, and I'm fighting every instinct I have I want to say his real name because there's still some nights I wake up and I'm thinking about this kid. But even when you know that there's a bully at work, it's hard to catch them. And we get this idea in our mind that that's the bully and all this bad stuff. He's at the epicenter of it, and we got to fix it, and we got to make him pay for what he's doing to these other students. And that's really not the case. Okay, we have to get that mindset that this is a behavior. This is our student too. We're not throwing that student who's been doing the bullying away, but we need to give that student the support too. We need to support the students who are being victimized by these behaviors also. So please understand that bottom statement there, behavior is a permanent characteristic. We're getting away from that mindset, okay? I'm sure many of you are away from that already, okay? And I want us all to realize and recognize that behaviors that we're seeing in the schools, we are determined and dedicated to the idea that we can change those behaviors. I don't know what this slide is about. What I see when I see this slide is somebody else made this slide, and I don't exactly understand the context, but okay. That's right. That's right. Big death. Things are not always okay. Perfect. So back to the types of bullying. When I talk to students who have been victimized by bullying behavior, one of the things that I always try to teach them is that bullies thrive on being able to isolate a student and being able to get a predicted response out of a student. Okay, and so there are increasing ways that they do that, and the students who are going to exercise some of these bad behaviors will do it online, where the other student doesn't feel they have anybody there to help them. They feel like they get ganged up on. They feel like they can't let their parents in on this conversation, so they feel really cut off from their help. Same happens in the hallways in a physically intimidating way. Okay, students who get kind of separated from the herd sometimes are the ones who are experiencing the bullying. It also happens in whether or not a student feels included. There are, and I'll give you an insight into my pathetic, miserable life, but I remember being a 7th grader and going to sit at a lunch table and being told, because of something I had done at basketball practice the other day when I overstepped my bounds and tried to coach somebody, being told this table isn't for me anymore. okay? And that sort of exclusion from our friends, that has a big time effect on our students, okay? And when we see things like that happening, it's not necessarily appropriate for us to go to that lunch table and say, no, 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 make room for this student. She's got to sit here today. It's where she sat yesterday. But knowing that we have an opportunity maybe to work with that student who just got shunned by her peers and build her back up a little bit and be able to say, you know what, you can sit at my table, okay? Or we're gonna take a special interest in you today, okay? I think I hit all those, but for some reason, our middle school girls seem to be gifted as far as bullying behavior goes, okay? And it's not to make light of it, but it is kind of humorous that they are all well trained at how to make someone feel ostracized, at how to make somebody feel like a 3-week period in 7th grade is the longest stretch of their life. Okay, and so as a substitute, when you see some of that ganging up going on, or that, particularly that isolation that's being created, that's an opportunity for you to, what I ask my teachers to do, what I ask guidance counselors or school counselors to do, rather than just by word of mouth telling somebody else in that grade level, another teacher there, take the time to write it on an index card or sticky note or half a sheet of paper. But when we write it down, people are much more likely to follow up on it. Okay, and if you as a substitute, write a note to the principal or to the school counselor and can say, look, I'm noticing, my niece's name is Anna, so I usually use Anna as my fake student. I'm noticing that Anna, is being a little bit isolated from her peers. Write that down and give it to the principal or the school counselor, and that will help them follow up on that. They're told so many different things throughout the day that it a lot of times, unfortunately, is in one ear, out the other. And then 3 weeks later, the student says, well, I told so-and-so, and we have no record of that. Research suggests, and I'm going to read this one, not the whole thing to you, but at least the top part here. Some research suggests students are most likely to be bullied because of perceived differences. Okay, and this isn't anything new to us, but I can tell you that one community that is very much under fire right now is the LBGT community. Okay, and not that you need to, on your seating chart, list all your lesbian students or put an L under their name or anything like that, but have an awareness about you of when you see a student who is maybe going out on a limb, maybe dressing a little bit differently. Okay. It's not always appropriate to talk to that student and say, why are you dressing like this? But keep an eye on those situations, and if you see mean behavior happening out of there, go ahead and report that on up. Obviously, in an area like this where there's a lot of diversity as far as socioeconomics, there's a tendency for the haves and the have-nots to sometimes be at odds, and that could be a source of tension and frustration, and where bullying comes in sometimes. So be mindful of those. One of the things that I can tell you from a speaker that I heard a couple summers ago, when you are going through a hallway, it is sometimes very easy to just look at a group of students and be able to tell kind of what their roles in their clique are. And this is something to be mindful of, and something that after I heard this speaker, I went back to school where I was principal, and I started to look at the hallways a little bit differently. A lot of times, those students who are, it might be an indicator of who's in charge and who's doing the bullying. The student who is physically in the middle of that group, okay, if 4 girls or 5 girls, we'll deal with 5 because it's got obviously a middle number there. But if 5 girls are in the hallway, it's usually that young lady square in the middle of that alignment of students who is the one who is, kind of behind the bullying. Okay, the students, and it works almost like a business where you have a CEO and you have other mid-level managers that go out and do these things, and you have some students who, maybe that one that's all the way out on the side up against the lockers or whatever, who is going to carry out a lot of those actions, but the actions they're carrying out are so they can fit in with that person in the middle. Okay, There are a lot of times when we see, like that stereotype that we were talking about, that person, straight A student, that group of girls sitting at a library table, okay, not the one that you would suspect, but sometimes the people carrying out those deeds are trying to perform for her because she's got them under her control, okay? She's the queen bee. Okay? And in fact, the speaker was talking about queen bees and wannabes. Okay, a lot of the people who carry out these mean behaviors are doing it for the acceptance of somebody else, okay? And that's sometimes tough for their parents to understand, but that's how, in my position, how we end up addressing a lot of those things is, we understand that your daughter or your son is engaging in some of this negative behavior, and we're trying to support that child and understand that he or she doesn't have to be a follower in that group. We can set a better example for students, okay? We also find that students who sometimes feel that there's a lack of control in their home life are the ones who try to exert more control over others in school. Okay, and that might be something, particularly if you're lucky enough to be in a long-term sub situation, you might be able to pick up on this a little bit more. Those students who something isn't hitting right at home, and you might start to see a change in their behavior when they're a little bit more controlling of their peers. I had a girl that I'm hoping to, in about 7 more years, go back and see her graduate, but she was a queen bee, and she did everything she could to tell her friends who they could be friends with, okay? And whether or not they were going to, right down to the food they were putting on their plate in the cafeteria, okay? And all we ask from you in those situations is you help us be aware of those situations. Keep your eyes open if you're seeing them. Help us to act on those by funneling that information up to us. I think we've covered some of these myths, okay? Bullies aren't always the loners. Sometimes they're the most popular kids. They have some sort of power among their peers, and they exercise it. And a lot of times it is, though, about building themselves up by tearing somebody else down, okay? So when our school counselors talk to small groups of students or large groups of students, usually that's the message. It is about self-esteem and building that up and knowing that you have, as one person, you have autonomy over your interactions, and that you are allowed to be different than your best friend, and you're allowed to treat people how you want. But we all, kind of the golden rule thing, except public school, we don't really get to call it the golden rule very often. Some of the things to be on the lookout for, because a lot of times, nowadays, students are walking around saying, I'm being bullied. Okay, they have a hard time telling you what they like. They have a much harder time telling you what's wrong. Okay, so some of the things to keep an eye out for, again, most of you will get into a routine where you might be in the same building 3 times a week and seeing a lot of the same kids, and you'll become part of the fabric of that school. As you start to notice, or if you notice, students who are becoming a little bit more unkempt in their appearance, or students that normally are outgoing and raising their hand for every question, but now are a little bit more reserved or sitting at the edge of the carpet instead of in the middle. Things like that, they may be subtle, but keep an eye on those. We, from the central office level even, and the front office at each school, we monitor students' attendance. When truancy can sometimes be an indicator of when a student is having a rough go of things, and certainly when we see a decline in grades. Usually our first reaction is they must be on drugs. Second is perhaps there's a bullying situation there. I think I'm getting to the end of my time here, but when we talk about de-escalation techniques, another outstanding speaker I saw last year said something in a way that I hope I get close to how he said it, but we all know what to do when a baby cries. Okay? If you're in a grocery store and you hear a baby cry, we all have this instinct, this adult instinct where we listen, we try to figure out, do we know the sound of that crying? Is that our child? If the crying continues, we almost instinctively start to move towards that crying child. Okay, and that's biology. That's how we're wired. There's this great gift where in systematic order here where baby doesn't have language, but baby knows how to communicate that there's something isn't right, they need something. And we're wired, because we're smarter than babies, to say, okay, baby's hungry, baby needs change, baby needs something, okay? And that order stays in place throughout the child's life. When they get into elementary school, they're not necessarily crying, but some of what they're saying may as well just be like a baby crying. They are trying to communicate a need, okay? And we are adults. We're wired to be smarter than those kids. We're wired to meet their needs. And that's gonna play directly into this de-escalation part here, okay? I want you to understand that sometimes students are gonna get mad. And they might be taking it out on you, but they're not mad at you, okay? You might tell them, hey, I told you 5 minutes ago it's time to get to work, and you haven't done anything, I need you to get on task. And they might go off on you, okay? For something that happened to them last night, or that morning, or something that's been eaten at them little by little over the last 3 weeks. And it's not you, and you can't take it personally, okay? So what you can do, and what we want you to do, is understand, that's just like a baby crying, okay? The child is communicating a need. They might not have the vocabulary, they might not be able to articulate it yet, but I'm the adult here. I'm going to remain calm. I'm going to help this child get what they need, and that's not, this is off record, okay? That's not smacking that child, because that's what that child needs, okay? You can laugh at that, because I've had days as a classroom teacher where I've come home and thought, I hope that child's parent wears him out when he gets home today, okay? But that's not the service we provide, okay? You need to be respectful, okay? That doesn't mean that if a student is calling you every name in the book, that you're going to treat them like royalty, okay? You're not going to be a doormat for these students, but at the same time, you're not going to sink to their level, okay? You're not going to get nasty with them. You're not going to get in their face, okay? One of the worst mistakes I ever saw a substitute make, two, made by the same substitute the same day. One, a student started to raise his voice, and she took a step towards the student, which is about the worst thing she could have done with the student. Because what does that look like to a student? That's aggression, that's confrontation, that's engaging in this instead of de-escalating, okay? So be very mindful of this. The other thing that she did, which ended up being the reason why she no longer worked for me, is a different student was trying to enter in a classroom. She put her arm out and barred that student, and it was an instinct I'm sure she had as being a mother and with her own children, but something that we can't do. You are not in a position to physically impede a student unless that student is trying to hurt himself or someone else, okay? If it's that they're having a tantrum, let the school officials deal with that, okay? But be very aware of how you're carrying yourself when that student pops off and is really trying to get the best of you. You have to win. And the way you win is by remaining calm and remembering that you're the adult. And that child is not going to get the best of you, okay? It says at the bottom there, don't be defensive even if the comments or insults are directed at you. Q-tip, quit taking it personally, okay? Just divorce yourself from that moment, okay, and stop taking those things personally. Communicate effectively non-verbally, okay, again, keep space between you, okay? What it says there about getting to their eye level, this is particularly effective with smaller children, obviously, okay, but defiant children, if they're bucking their teacher, they're bucking their parents, they're used to talking back to that person who's 3 feet taller than them. Okay, one of the things that you really can do to leverage that conversation is bend your knees, get down where that student isn't looking up, okay, where that student isn't already in combat mode, okay? Stoop down, talk to the student, show the student that he has your attention, okay? And be a good listener. And a lot of times, great customer service rule is If somebody is mad at you and ranting and raving, you let them get it all out and then ask them to say it again. Okay, and say, I just want to make sure that I heard everything. That I got all your complaint right. Can you tell me all that again? The second time through it, I guarantee you they're not as fired up. Okay? Let them tire themselves out by being a good listener and getting on their level and non-verbally communicating. I'm here to help you. The last would de-escalate with discussion. Trust your instincts. Empathize with feelings, but not with behavior. Suggest alternatives and explain limits in a firm but respectful tone. You are the authority in that classroom, okay? And that I want you to understand the breadth of your authority in there. You are the enforcer of the rules, okay? You are not the doler out of consequences, and you are not going to suspend a student. Okay, it is not effective for you to say you're going to be suspended, okay, but it is effective for you to try to communicate to the student, listen, we're both here for the same reason today, okay, and this is for you to get the most out of this lesson, okay, and the sooner we can get that student back on track, the sooner we can get that student thinking about why we're in school and not having that confrontation. You know, I would guess that 90% of you or more are parents. You know that when your child is mad, there's going to be a cooling off period. Might be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You might have to expect that child that just blew up is going to need a few minutes before anything else is able to sink in. Okay? You are the authority in that classroom. You can give them that time. Okay, but our goal is to get those students back on track as soon as possible. I say this because those of you who have been substitutes for a long time or have been former teachers know that you cut yourself off the knees when you bring the administrator into the classroom. Okay? That is, it undermines your own authority. It's not that we don't want you to do that. I'll get you in just 1 second, okay? There's a definite time and place when you need that administrator to come in and read the riot act and help you regain control, okay? Or it may not be that you have lost it, but it wasn't there to begin with, okay? That's fine. But as I said at the very beginning, there are some substitutes who give us a level of confidence and security. Okay, that's the substitute who we trust. Students are acting the way the teacher has them act when the teacher's there. Okay, the substitutes who aren't long for being in any one building are the ones who can't enforce and can't live by those policies and are constantly hitting that button for the principal to come down. Question?
Well, it's not a question, but sometimes when you're in a situation with a student like that, if you can remind them of their choices, because their choice determines what you have to do according to our requirements. And when they start thinking about their choices and their consequences, a lot of times that's all you have to say.
And thank you for that comment. One of the tougher disabilities that some of our students deal with is opposition defiance disorder or opposite defiance. And that's one of the best strategies for working with those students is the student who is going to do the opposite of what you want just because you say it's time to do math problem number 47 there, they're going to want to do anything but that. So sometimes we have to give them options and we stack the deck when we do that. Okay, so that they feel they are choosing their own path, but we're kind of creating a successful path for them when we do that. Okay, and so reminding them, listen, you can do this assignment, and you know, like everybody else, and when we're done, then whatever incentive follows that, or you can choose not to do this assignment, but this is the incentive or the lack of incentive that follows that. So sometimes stacking the deck and making a clear choice, but allowing them to pick it helps. I found it becomes less and less effective as your children get older. I proudly told my 2-year-old, you can either take a nap now, or you can get spanked and take a nap now. The choice is yours, okay? It's not quite the same as the students get older. We have to be a little bit more crafty in how we do that. Elements of a good behavior report. We do want to know when your time in the classroom that day is over, how things went. The teacher and the principal both need to know where things were left and how things went. You will find that teachers are very eager to correct students who ran over a substitute. Okay, and teachers are embarrassed when their students don't behave for you, and so that communication helps for the next time that you're coming into that classroom. Okay, I wouldn't, as a substitute, I do not want you to feel you're doing the student a favor by not reporting that you had to call that student down several times. Okay, because that reinforces it the next time there's a substitute in there, whether it's you or not. Okay, but if you put in your report what the issues were, the teacher can address that. Okay, and the teacher can make sure that that's not going to happen the next time that a substitute is in the classroom. These all also are kind of public documents. So when you are putting things in there, okay, you don't want to say, what the heck was Johnny's problem today, okay? Or I don't know who he thinks he is, because those things are unintentionally, but sometimes get into the wrong hands, okay? If that ends up sitting on the secretary's desk, somebody else picks it up, okay? Your personal comments about a child can end up being very public, and we don't want that, okay? We want black and white objective reporting on those things. So if you say, yes, I had to talk to so-and-so about his choice of words, that's a little bit different than saying so-and-so is clueless about how to act in a classroom, okay? The last bullet there says, write down the actual words the student said, including curse words, so the principal and the parents understand exactly what happened. Now, I'm still, even at this old age, a little bit shy about swearing in front of this many wonderful adults, so I'm not going to do it, but if a student says the F word, I don't want you to write, your principal doesn't want you to write F dash dash dash, okay? It's okay, God will forgive you for writing all the letters that spell that word, okay? And put it in there, because at the end of the day, we have to hold the student accountable, okay? And that we have to be able to say, this is what was said, okay? Not frick, okay? But not factor, that's another bad F word for me. That was a third grade math joke. They're not all winners, sorry. One of the things and this is sort of bring us back to the beginning here with bullying, but one of the things that we can attribute to why we are changing our perspective and we're experiencing less incidents of bullying is our staff takes it very seriously, okay? And when students report these things to us, we do, each year, we get better at documenting what was reported, documenting how it was dealt with and who dealt with it, okay? And those aren't statistics that we like to put out there because they end up being very confidential with students and sometimes easy to identify a student who reported things like that. But we are doing a better job of making sure that everybody plays a part in responding to those bullying situations. We are teaching about character and about bodily autonomy and about being respectful to each other and understanding, that sort of self-actualized adult, what we want ourselves, what do we want our students to be like, okay? And that's talking to them about character and trying actively to develop that character. And lastly, our school resource officers play a large role in this. Their role, as they see it from their sheriff and from all the training they get statewide, is the idea of being part of the school community and being in those hallways, understanding the different neighborhoods, if you will, in the high school campus, okay, and understanding who hangs out at this corner, but being accessible and talking to students and building those relationships, okay, so those are resources that are around you. Obviously, if you're in an elementary school, you might not have a resource officer there, okay, but in the middle school, in the high school, that's another person who is included in why we see that the number of bullying incidents decrease each year is we have that community approach, okay? That's the end of my slide, but I know I threw a lot at you there. If you have questions, you can, I'll take as many as 3 questions right now. Yes, ma'am.
Do you work with any students in the school, or faculty in the school, or guidance counselors in the school?
Do I? Okay. I'm the Director of Student Services, and I'm responsible for meeting with and providing professional development for our school counselors. I also work directly with the principals and assistant principals on the disciplinary matters, work directly with students when it comes to placing them for homebound settings. And a lot of times when parents are finding that the student is experiencing a tough time just in the culture of the classroom or through some relationships, a lot of times I will work directly with students there and work on giving them some strategies. I'm trying to get a peer counseling program off the ground this year where we give some students some training to help them talk to other students about how they have overcome some difficult situations. Yes, ma'am.
Would you tell us your name again?
David Scott.
Scott.
Yes, ma'am. S-C-O-T-T.
Thank you. I thought that's
Now,
what you said.
if you are angry, if there's something wrong, if you have a complaint, call the maintenance building and ask for Mr. Scott, and they'll give you Keith, who was here just a little bit earlier. If you have something wonderful to report, I joke with my wife that in my position, a lot of times it feels like for all the good things and the bad things that happen in my position, I have to filter out a lot of the good and only deal with the bad. But if you have good things to tell me or great ideas, please call me and share those. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you again for your interest and your service, and I hope you have a successful year, and I hope that you feel comfortable in any building you work in and develop those relationships. And thank you very much for doing this for our children. And I'm going to turn things back over to Ms. Christy Landon. Thank you.
I appreciate your patience this morning. I know this is long, it's a lot of information. I can tell you we're a lot closer to the end than we are to the beginning now. I do want to introduce you, though, to the newest member of our Human Resources team. Mrs. Tanya Verlick joined us last week as our Human Resources Coordinator. Many of you may be familiar with Mrs. Verlick. She's not only a product of Henry County Public Schools and a member of our community, she's also been with the Henry Martinsville Department of Social Services for the past 20 years and has served most recently over the last several years as the director there with social services. So it seemed very appropriate to have her do the mandated reporter training with you this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, I'm the teacher's worst nightmare. I'm a wiggler. And so if I have to stand here, then my hands do this. So can you hear me if I stand away? Yes. Yes? Yay. Because I have a big mouth. I can talk loud. Well, as Christy said, I am Tanya Verlick, and I was formerly with the Department of Social Services for 20 years. I came out of Henry County Public Schools. My mom taught school forever. And she retired when I graduated from college and said, now the bill is yours, have fun. So I started out in social services, and I started in child protective services. So it's just apropos that I get the opportunity to talk to you about mandated reporting today. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, not only because it's where I came from and it's what I've been doing for the past 20 years, but it's important to our community, it's important to our children, it's important to you as educators. Because if you have children in your classroom who are dealing with these types of things at home, they're not learning. They're focused on, I gotta go back there. I've gotta go home. And that's where their head's gonna be. And you're not gonna have their full attention. So we wanna talk a little bit about the legal aspect of mandated reporting. And in your packet, you should have all of these slides. But we start out that mandated reporting is required by law. It's not an option. It doesn't say you can if you want to. It doesn't say maybe. It says you shall. As a mandated reporter in the scope of your professional duties under the Code of Virginia 63.2-1509, you're required by law to report. It doesn't say if you know there is abuse or neglect. It says if you suspect. Suspect does not mean that you do a thorough investigation and you looked at the bruises yourself. It means that a child has given you enough reason to suspect that something is going on in their situation, in their home environment. It may not be in their living environment. How many of you have had children that you've worked with or that you know of that go to a babysitter after school or a child care center after school? It can happen there too. It can happen in the schools, unfortunately. So that's something that we need to talk about. We're going to talk about all of these aspects. But before we move on past the mandated reporting requirements, I want to know how many of you have ever had to report suspected child abuse or neglect. Okay, so we've got lots of hands up here. It's not fun, it's uncomfortable, but it's important. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of the good things that come out of child abuse and neglect investigation and why it's so important that you report it, because it's a prevention method. The last thing any social worker ever wants to get is a fatality. So reporting abuse and neglect actually acts as prevention. Because if you're suspecting something in the classroom, or you're seeing something, that child's living and breathing, and we can fix that. But after that child is passed, we can't. So it's very important that you do report, because it can be very serious. As a substitute teacher, it is your responsibility, it is your professional obligation to report. So I understand that sometimes we think, oh, this is the teacher's classroom, they'll take care of it. The child's probably already told them. The child may even tell you, I told Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. Does that negate your responsibility to report? No. You still need to report. And the reason is because they may have said something to Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, but they didn't say it in such a way that it actually rose to the level of suspicion of child abuse or neglect. So make sure that you're reporting. Henry County Schools has a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Social Services on how those reports will come in. There are two main ways that reports happen. One is that if you suspect something, you can call the local Department of Social Services. Here it's Henry County and Martinsville because they're merged. And that number is 656-4300 if you need it. And there's an option for child abuse and neglect reporting, and you can dial that little button, and it goes right to Amber Reed, who I hired right before I left, and that's what she does every day. At that point, they will assess the information. It is not, that person's not going to tell you, yes, it's founded or it's unfounded. They're going to tell you, thank you for the information, we will assess it for validity. That's all you're going to get. The other option is you can call the 1-800, the Virginia Department of Social Services hotline. And I think on page 16 is the actual number for that 1-800 hotline. I will forewarn you right now, it is a hotline for the entire state. There's about 4 people on it. So just like any other call center, guess what's going to happen? You're going to wait. You're going to wait a good while. Usually, it's about anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes on that line. Which is unfortunate. That's why I always strongly recommend you call the local Department of Social Services. And if it's after business hours or it's a holiday, because they do different holidays than the schools get sometimes, then your principal can always call 911. They have an on-call worker 24/7.
Will you give us that number again?
The local department, 656-4300. And it's an automated system, and I can't remember what number we assigned it. There's an assigned number for child abuse and neglect reporting, and it goes to a live person.
Repeat it again.
656-4300. Now, what the school asks of you is that you don't have to call yourself. What the school wants is for you to go to the principal of the school in which you are subbing. Okay? So if you have a child that comes to you, or you have any reason to suspect that this child has been abused, maybe they came in with a black eye. It can happen. Maybe they can't sit down today. And you say, what's going on? Why aren't you sitting down? Well, I can't. I got a whipping last night. They'll tell you all kinds of things. Make sure if they tell those things to you, don't wait till the end of the day to go to your principal and let them know to call it in. Because what happens at the end of the day?
They go home.
They go home. If it's a little one, guess what happens when they go home? Somebody says, how was your day? And they say, I told my teacher that I got a whipping last night. And then what happens? They're either gonna get another one, or they're gonna get told, don't you dare say another word to anybody about anything. So it's very important that if a child comes to you at 8 o'clock in the morning and they have a black eye, and you say, what happened? And they say, oh, well, my mom's boyfriend or my dad's girlfriend punched me last night. Okay, we need to get to somebody and talk about this. Because if the earlier it gets to the Department of Social Services, the better chance they have of either getting out to the school to see that child and getting that firsthand information before anybody else does, or it gives them an opportunity to get a family partnership meeting or some other type of contact with that family to ensure that child can go home to a safe environment. Okay? So your principals are your primary source of report. That should be the first person you go to in the school. However, principals aren't always at the school. It is my understanding, and Ms. Landon may be able to help with this, that each principal is expected to, if they are not in that school building, they're expected to leave a designee who is responsible to handle these situations. The principals and their designees are all trained in how to handle this. I will caution you that if you do not know whether or not the principal reported, it is still your legal responsibility to report. So if you lay this out on the table and they say, okay, I'll get to it, the reporting responsibility still falls on you. You're a mandated reporter. A court is not going to look at you and say, okay, we'll let you off this time because you did report it. They're going to want to know what the follow-up was. How did you ensure it got reported? All right. So you're reporting to your principal or their designee. As I said, if you know the principal's not there that day, you might want to find out who that designee is if they don't have it posted or it's not shared with you when you come in. If you are not sure if it's valid, how many times have you heard a child say, well, I didn't get supper last night. I didn't get supper last night either. It's not because of abuse or neglect, it's because I ran out of time. But it's important to ask maybe another question or two to figure out, is this really neglect? But if the child comes in every day and they're starving, and you say, what did you have for supper last night? Oh, we don't have any food in our house. What do you mean you don't have any food at your house? Because sometimes not having any food at your house means what?
They don't like what was on.
Mom didn't cook what I wanted because I wanted chicken nuggets and she cooked salmon instead last night. That wasn't my favorite. So sometimes there may be some of that involved as well. But you are all professionals and you know a child's behavior. If that child comes in and they'll eat anything that you hand them because they are starving and they smell a little and they're not really well put together and bugs are coming out of their book bags, okay, we might have a problem. I can't tell you the number of homes that I've gone in that the school had no idea that anything was bad. But I've had to take my shoes off and take off my clothes outside. The neighbors left me because I'm not going in like this. So you have to be careful and you have to listen. That is the critical piece of mandated reporting is listening. Because as a teacher, as a substitute teacher, you're busy. You come in, you've got an agenda, you've got things you've got to do, and here comes little Johnny up to you and says, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, I have a problem. It requires you to stop. It requires you to listen. And I was picking with Mr. Scott as he was leaving. I said he could have incorporated the mandated reporter training right into the bullying trainings. It's very similar information. When it comes to bullying behaviors, sometimes children act in ways that they've seen. And sometimes those behaviors are in the home. So just be mindful of what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Always err on the side of caution. Never assume anything. And just like Mr. Scott said when he was saying, actually write the words that the children are saying. It's important as a mandated reporter that you use their terminology. And some of my discussion may get a little graphic, and I apologize, but this is what the reality is. If a child comes to you and talks about her loogie, then you need to report that. You can't use the correct terminology because that child has no clue what that is. So when the social worker goes out and starts talking to them and they start using biologically correct terms, that child's looking at them like they have lost their mind. They don't have a clue what you're talking about. So make sure you're using the right words. All right. So the principal or their designee is going to make the call, typically to the local Department of Social Services. And when they do that, they're probably going to ask that you remain in the room. And that is because you heard the information first. That first-hand knowledge is what's so critically important, because that CPS worker is going to ask a million questions, and the principal's going to have the address, and they're going to have the phone numbers, and they're going to have all the stuff that they need to get out to the home, but they're not going to have the child's statement. So that's where you come in. Now keep in mind, when you're reporting, as a mandated reporter even, that information remains confidential. It is not shared with the family in any way, shape, or form. However, when the worker goes out to that home, and they know that CPS is out there asking questions, who do they first assume called on? The teacher. The school board, because where else is the child been today? So, it's gonna happen, and they're gonna accuse you, and they're gonna say all kinds of glorious things. You don't have to say a word. The social worker's not gonna say, well, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, they're the ones that called it in. They can't do that. However, if you report maliciously, and it's unfounded, and they take you before the court, they can have your name released if it's a malicious report. I don't think you have to worry about that. Any questions so far about the legal responsibility to report, or how to report? I think it's always important to find, if you're involved in that conversation with that first report, get the worker's name who you're reporting to. They're not necessarily going to be the worker who investigates the case. But it's important to have that name just for your own information and records. Because if additional information comes in, you may need to go right back into that classroom tomorrow, and little Johnny comes right back in and tells you more, because now they trust you. Or it may be that little Johnny was placed with grandma for safety plan overnight, and little Johnny says, oh, okay, they really were being honest with me. They really told me the truth. And so now they're going to tell you even more, and you're going to start getting the snowball effect of information. All of that information, it's important to report that, because that helps the investigator. See, this is why I can't do this. Don't move around too much. All right, so on your next page, I mentioned that there's a 1-800 number for Virginia Department of Social Services to report. And that's right down there on that bottom corner, the 1-800. When a child comes to you and they share information with you, good, bad, and ugly, just like Mr. Scott said in the bullying training, I always tell people you gotta watch your face. Watch your face. We talk about this a lot at the office. Watch your face. Because they will tell you things that your first instinct is, ooh. Well, what happens when you do that? They stop talking. They shut down because they think they've offended you. They don't want to do that. So where Mr. Scott was saying there are times you might not want to get down to their level, this is the time when it's probably more appropriate to get down to their level. To spend a little time looking them eye to eye, let them know that you're not offended by this, you're gonna make sure that they are taken care of. So it's always fun to watch social workers who sit on the floor all the time. It's a habit. You just go in, you just sit right down on the floor, don't worry about what's on the floor or what you picked up and took out with you when you left. You just sit there. I can't tell you how much stock I took in Quail lotion. Because That was something I was told from my first CPS supervisor, is take stock in quail lotion, you're gonna need it. It's like, great, this is awesome. Red, yep, done it all. Went to court with green hair one time just because it strips all the color out of your hair. So it's all kinds of good things that can happen. Another piece of this is once you have reported, and the worker may come out to the school, they may need to contact you because you were the person that the child talked to first. So don't be nervous if they say, you know, I need to ask you some additional questions. What was their behavior like when they spoke with you? Did you notice anything significant? So there's some things that are observations that you can't really get over the telephone, or that the intake worker's not gonna know to ask. Any other questions thus far, before I move on? Oh, yeah, I like this. There are penalties for failure to report. And this is why I said it's so important to verify that the principal or their designee has submitted the report. Because there are penalties that are associated. You have to report within 24 hours. My response to that is, as soon as you know it, report it. Then you don't worry about it's 23 and a half hours later. Just say it. If you see it, say it. Same thing with Lily. Tell me we do these together. But the first incident of not reporting is $500. Any subsequent is $1,000, not less than. In cases evidencing acts of rape, sodomy, or object sexual penetration, you can be found guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. So we don't really want to go there, so the best answer is, if you see it, say it. If you hear it, say it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the types of abuse and neglect. This is not a cover-all list. This is going to be options or things that could happen, but there's a lot that goes into abuse and neglect. And the minute that we think we've seen it all, we get surprised with something new. So you also have to understand that abuse and neglect is also the threat of. By the Code of Virginia, it defines it as an act of commission or omission or the threat of. Now, I might look at my child and say, oh, I could just beat you. Am I threatening him? Depends on what he did. But there are times when children are told, don't tell or this is going to happen. And they're terrified. They're terrified to report. So let's talk about the types here. First of all, before we get into the types, we have to understand that there are 4 criteria for validity. One is that the victim has to be under the age of 18 at the time of report. So if you have a 17-year-old who is 2 days from their birthday and you don't report until they're 18 and 1 day, it's not going to be a valid complaint. They have to be under the age of 18 at the time of report. Has to be within the jurisdiction. This one's a little iffy because with Henry County, Martinsville being merged, we have 2 jurisdictions in our area. However, let's say it happened in Patrick County, but they live in Henry County. It's still here. So don't worry about the jurisdiction issue. There's special placement situations where children may be from other localities or in our Henry County schools. Don't worry about that part, just call it in. The other things, it has to be at the hands of a caretaker. So let's suppose they're at Walmart and some random person comes up and smacks the child. That's a police issue. That's called assault and battery. So they take care of that, but it's not at the hands of a caretaker. And the last one is it has to meet the definition of abuse or neglect for the code. Keep in mind, as a substitute teacher, you are in the role of a caretaker by the Code of Virginia. It is an assumed caretaker role, meaning that you're responsible for that child during that school day. So if abuse or neglect happens in your classroom, then you are the caretaker and you will be investigated. And it's called an out-of-family investigation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the protocol for that as well. So we have 5 types of abuse or neglect. And it starts, of course, with physical abuse, which is what we see a lot of in Henry County and Martinsville, as well as neglect, unfortunately. But in the school systems, what we tend to get calls from, especially from substitute teachers, it's going to be physical abuse because it's present, it's visible, it's what you see that day. Neglect, sometimes you kind of have to see it over the course of time. It's not something that is necessarily going to be day one that you're there. But if you're a long-term sub, you're probably going to run into some neglect concerns. So you've got your physical abuse, you've got your physical neglect, one second. Sexual abuse, you have emotional maltreatment, mental abuse, and then you also are going to have medical neglect rolled up into this. And then substance-exposed newborns, which you're probably not going to see because it comes from the hospital. Somebody else.
If a student is in special education and they can be up to, 21, does that still count, or is that a different type of reporting?
No, it would fall under adult protective services once they took over that age of 18. So our question was, if you have a special population student that may be in the schools up until the age, or through the age of 21, I believe is how it's written in the schools, and abuse or neglect is occurring, and that child is over the age of 18, they're not really a child, but they're still being served by the schools, you would still be able to contact social services, but it would be adult protective services. Good question. Physical abuse, I'm not going to read all of these. I think you know what physical abuse is, but keep in mind around the harm as well. If a child comes to you and says, if I tell my mom, this is what happens, I have to stand in the corner and they throw footballs at my head. I investigated that. These are things that they might tell you that are concerning. If they got in trouble, how many of you had to discipline a child or had a child that got in trouble and they just melt down because they're terrified of what's going to happen when they get home? So that's something to be concerned about, and it probably warrants letting your principal know if there's a serious concern. So of course you've got bruises, welts, scrapes, cuts, abrasions, not the typical kid injury, knees, shins, riding their big wheel down the heel and flipped over 3 times, the typical childhood injuries. But if they come in with a black eye and they're 5, and they didn't say, oh, I fell off my scooter, and they're kind of hemming and hawing, it's probably worth a question or 2. This next slide talks about the behavioral indicators of physical abuse, and I'm not going to read all of these, but it's important to note that if a child is exhibiting any of these behaviors, that does not necessarily mean they're being physically abused. You need to look at the entire situation, the total context. Just because a child might be withdrawn or scared of going home, I was scared of going home if I got in trouble because my mom worked at the elementary school and she had eyes and ears everywhere and they all told her what I did. And I knew I was going to get it worse when I got home. It wasn't abuse or neglect. She was over here laughing because she was there. But it was, I knew my mama wasn't going to let me misbehave. That was the way it worked. So you have to also put in context. Another important thing that in this community that you need to recognize is that students will tell you about their parents cooking or making meth. That is a big thing in Martinsville and Henry County. They call it cooking, they call it shake and bake, call it all kinds of good stuff. It's got a new name every day. Shake and bake, so it happens in the car. And there's a whole lot of cars in Martinsville and Henry County that are shaking and baking, and I'm just letting you know now that they're very dangerous and they will explode. So will those houses. One drop of sweat and the whole thing goes up. So make sure if your child's talking about any of those things and they're scared or they're not feeling well, if they have been in a home where they are manufacturing methamphetamine, it is very dangerous to that child. They have to be completely taken care of outside. We can't even go into the home. They have to be taken to the hospital. They have to be decontaminated. They can't take any of their clothing, their bedding, their belongings, their babies, nothing. They can't take any of their toys with them. It is a complete start over. And this is a big thing in Martinsville and Henry County. So if you hear a child talking about drug deals, selling, they're a part of that. That's abuse or neglect. You need to report it. The next one is neglect. And of course, these are your basic necessities: food, clothing, shelter, those basic things that you think every child should have, or you think that they have until they tell you otherwise. Poverty is not neglect. Somebody who doesn't have and is doing the best they can with what they have is not neglect. It's poverty. So balance that out as well. Again, we're going into the indicators of neglect. Sometimes neglect it turns into medical neglect. A child has a really bad cavity that turns into an abscess. Mom and dad have decided not to take the child to the dentist. They come to school that day and their mouth is swollen up to here. They're in pain. They're not going to learn. So things can happen, but again, it happens typically with neglect over the course of time. Neglect is rarely a one-time incident unless they're abandoned or left alone for a significant period of time. All right. I love this part on the slide. It shouldn't hurt to be a child. And that is so true, because this can be physical pain, this can be emotional pain, and we need to think about that, because if they're hurting, they're not learning. Again, same thing with these indicators. It talks about the emotional, the cognitive, the developmental, and the academic indicators. In and of themselves does not constitute neglect, but a combination of factors or an ongoing repetition of these factors and indicators may mean neglect. Sexual abuse. This is a big one as well. It's a very uncomfortable topic to discuss. It is, oh, she has a question over here. It is not something any of us want to think about, that children have to go through, but it happens. Sexual abuse complaints are difficult to investigate. They're very emotional, and they take time, lots and lots of time. So I want you to know that when a sexual abuse complaint comes in, it is a joint investigation between the Department of Social Services and law enforcement, because typically those are going to result in some sort of criminal charge. And so neither of us want to step on each other's toes. So we make sure that we do that together, and make sure that these victims only have to tell their story one time. And these children are typically not going to be interviewed in the school. They're going to be taken to the Child Advocacy Center in Rocky Mount for a forensic interview and a forensic examination. So when the social worker is not running out to the school to interview, they've got another plan. And that's because we have an MOU with the police department to do that. Again, the same with the sexual abuse indicators. You all can read those, but the biggest indicator of sexual abuse is in cap letters right there. It's the child statement. If they say it, believe it and report it. Don't get into questions, don't get into too much information, just report it. And again, we go on with additional indicators. But as I said before, these are not all encompassing. Academic deterioration does not necessarily mean a child being sexually abused. Mental abuse, what's called in the code. This also includes bizarre discipline, intimidation. Again, we go back to our bullying training, so we don't have to go into a lot of detail about this, but this is intimidation and withdrawal symptoms that are at the hands of an adult or a caretaker. Bizarre discipline, some people ask what that is. It is a multiple definition, every case is different kind of scenario. It depends on the situation. It could be, disciplining a child by doing something to them physically to incite ridicule against them. You want to embarrass them. You want them to go out in public and be humiliated. So you discipline them in a certain way. Maybe shaving their head and their eyebrows, and it's a female high school student, to send them out there so their peers will laugh at them. Making a child kneel on frozen peas. Those types of things are sometimes indicators of bizarre discipline. All right, so let's talk a bit about what happens. So if it is a complaint against you as a professional, you are the caretaker. It's called an out-of-family investigation, and there's a joint investigation. It may include the police department, but it will include the school system. If you are functioning in your capacity as a professional, we have to, as the Department of Social Services, by law, contact your principal, and because you're a substitute teacher, Human Resources Department is always involved as well, and they participate in that investigation. They also get the results of that investigation because you were acting in your professional capacity. If it is a family member or somebody that you know in the schools that you've called and this child's parent, grandparent, caretaker has abused this child, and you want to know what happened. You called it in, you know they're being checked into, but you just want to know what happened. You will get a letter, or the school, whomever called it in, who's the principal, they'll get the letter that will say that the investigation has been completed, or the family assessment has been completed, and appropriate services were offered. You're not going to know whether it was founded or unfounded, because that's protected, that's their confidential information. But you will know that it's been completed. Typically, they're done within 45 to 60 days. There are several findings if it goes along the investigation track, level 1, 2, and 3. If it is a founded means there's a preponderance of the evidence that abuse and neglect occurred. So level 1 stays in the system for 18 years unless it's a sexual abuse, and that would stay in the system for 25. A level 2 is 7 years, and a level 3 is 3 years, and they stay as long as the most recent complaint. So 18 can turn into 35 if they keep getting founded complaints. There's another track that most people don't talk about very much, and that's the family assessment track. So if it's a child who is a new family we're not familiar with, it's something that is like a inadequate shelter, inadequate clothing, inadequate hygiene, things where it's more of a service need, that the workers need to get in there and provide services to the family. It doesn't do anybody any good to label their parent as an abuser or neglector. So we would rather go with the family assessment track in those respects, where it talks about, does this family need services or not? If they do, they get them. So it doesn't put it as quite as big of an adversarial role. However, as a professional, if a complaint is registered against you, there's only one option, and that's investigation. So, that is a quick summary of mandated reporting. Ultimately, the best way I can summarize this is that it's your responsibility as a professional to report. Make sure you do. Any questions before I leave the floor and let the floor come up here and finish up? Questions? All right. Y'all have a great year.
Hello. Well, this concludes our meeting. If there are new employees that I've just processed, I need you to stay a few minutes after, because to go over the little ASOP program that we've got to go off with you. All your forms and papers, you can leave them on the chair as you go out. And welcome back, and we hope you have a good year.